Yep. You have not been mistaken by the title, dear viewer. You have experienced the greatest year in gaming history. For us people who do not go outside and spend 90% of our time thinking about the most unique excuses to be able to stay within the confinements of our home and God forbid talk to other people. For us, the developers absolutely cooked, served, ate and even served seconds this year. Hades 2, Silksong, Clair Obscur, Look Outside, Blueprints, Dispatch, Ark Riders, Death Stranding 2, Night Train, Battlefield 6, Kingdom Come 2. And the best part about it is that the majority of the titles that have been highlighted this year are indie games. It has been so good in fact that it sparked a conversation about what could even be called an indie game anymore. Because what has been frequently associated in the community's collective understanding of it could no longer be valid. Expedition 33 is by definition an indie game, but it manages to foreshadow majority of the AAA games from the last decade by margins in original soundtrack, gameplay, story, visuals, world building, uniqueness, creative ideas department, and probably most of the other categories you could think about. And I'm only talking about video games, and it does not mean that other media have not been fed a little ambrosia this year. Superman being one of the best superhero movies for a long time, long anticipated resurrection of MCU with a movie that's finally not an absolute garbage, a work of art that is the new ÇainSaw Man movie, Frankenstein, Weapons, Demon Slayer Infinity Castle, and probably many more that I haven't watched. I'm only sad that Brandon Sanderson had not released Wind and Truth 4 weeks later, so that I could say that the final part of one of my favorite sagas of all time also came to an end this year. But I've read it this year, so in my headcanon, I'm counting it. I've never really made a video like this before, because it's not one clean format. Not a review, nor a list, and definitely not me pretending I'm an awards panel. Think of it as something like a personal highlight reel, the stuff I keep returning to, replaying and can't stop thinking about. I was battling with my thoughts on how I wanted to structure this video. I've played a lot of things this year, although it was also one of my arguably busiest years of work and college-wise, so not nearly as much as I wanted to. And I couldn't buy every single title that had come out this year, even though I wanted to do that pretty much. Was this supposed to be the list of the awesome stuff that came out this year, or what I played this year? Because, for instance, one of my favorite discoveries this year was Nine Souls, working really well combination of classical platformer with distinct at first glance kid-friendly art style, but incredibly gory and tackling some really fucked up stuff, with a complex combat system that could be best explained as 2D Sekiro. To Look Outside, the title that came out in 2025, official premiere was this year that had added a lot of content, but early access has been playable way before that. Could I include Dispatch, which is undoubtedly one of the most interesting games that came out this year, even though I did not play it, but watched two different YouTube Let's Plays, and since it's so linear, me playing it would not change a thing. If one of the games that I played the most during this year is League of Legends, should I discuss it here? No, actually, on second thought, we don't mention Nick here. But I'm trying to say that it's not a classical top 20, 10, 5 or whatever the fuck you wanna call it. So I'm not going to limit myself and enforce some heavy ruling that would confine and stop me from talking about what I was excited about this year. So I can just yap for an hour or so. At first, I've considered structuring it in order from the best to worst or the opposite. However, in the end, I've decided to ditch this idea. It's hard to compare because for me, when a game's biggest highlight is its story, I don't usually play it more than once. So I naturally spend more time in Hades 2 than in Clair Obscur. Although that might change after their thank you update. And the same goes for Night Train in comparison to Silksong, so try to treat the order I presented as mostly random and try not to read too much into it. Additionally, since most of my free time I spend on video games and my channel is also primarily focused on them, that's what I'm going to focus on and ignore the other stuff. Well, besides one. So, let me be honest, before I have even thought about the idea of this video, I was already pretty much done writing the script for a ÇainSaw Man film. It was supposed to be a standout video and I wasn't initially planning on including it here. However, the algorithm can be cruel and I already have an experience of being locked in the only one type of content after making Marvel Rivals content for like half a year. But it is something that I just have to talk about since it has quickly risen to the status of probably my favorite movie I have ever watched. The moment I exited the theater, I just had to talk about it. So let me just start with the fact that I was never a big ﷺ Man fan before. Mostly because I wasn't much of an enthusiast of what they did with Denji as a protagonist. I did like him, yes, however the whole I want to eat, sleep and feel woman's touch character trait didn't really appeal to me. Mostly because I'm a weird type of guy that completely despises all the forms of a fanservice in any anime or manga, because for me it feels like the anime equivalent of a cheap jumpscare in a low-budget horror movie. Gripping a viewer just by showing him boobs on the screen made me feel like the author did not really have anything else going for him. Which does seem fucking insane when I'm talking about manga written by Tatsuki Fujimoto, who is mainly known for trying to levitate and getting pecked by women, but please stay with me, I'm making a point here. That being said, I did read the manga though. Probably because I was suffering from an Attack on Titan shortage and was looking for something to soothe my broken heart. And I've heard only good things about ﷺ Man from all my Psycho fan friends. Additionally, I had the pleasure of borrowing the actual physical copies of a few first couple of chapters from them, and then reading in the old school way like God intended, and not, sailing the Black Seas? And when I read what I could in the traditional form, I thought, fuck, might as well finish it. I read the entire first part, so everything past the creepy door, snowball fight and dancing arc. Well, that was available at the time, and I really enjoyed it, mostly despite the constant freakiness, not because of it. I did not, however, watch the anime. I heard good things about it, but the 3D kind of art style really put me off. I'm saying all that because I want to lay out the ground I've been on when I first stepped into the theater to watch the movie. And emphasize that my opinion on this movie is hardly exaggerated, because I really do not have any strong opinion about the series. For me it was decent, I don't know, 7 out of 10. For me, nowhere near the Out or Full Metal Alchemist level. The type of anime/manga that you read or watch and say, hey, that was pretty good. I always like to use John Wick as an example in those cases. Essentially, you get what you pay for kind of deal, but a damn good deal at that. I really like the Reze arc in the manga. I dare say it might have been the best part of it for me. And that's why I even decided to watch the movie, since I don't really go to theaters a lot these days. I expected to watch the funny packing movie with a bunch of fanservice, decent music and cool fight scenes. Safe to say, I received everything that could be expected from it beforehand. I left the cinema completely speechless, or no, scratch that, I couldn't stop yapping about it to everyone who wanted to listen. The first couple of days after the screening, I was absolutely devastated mentally. Let me just go ahead and say it, so we can get it out of the way and get to the more interesting part of the video. This movie is absolutely fucking incredible. You see, beforehand, whenever someone asked me what my favorite piece of media was, I was able to give a relatively straight answer. What's your favorite anime? Attack on Titan. What's your favorite TV series? Breaking Bad. What's your favorite video game? Currently, probably Clair Obscur. However, when someone asked me about my favorite movie, I could never be sure. Maybe it was Blade Runner, maybe Shawshank Redemption, maybe Dune, Shatterwalk Island, Catch Me If You Can. There are so many great different movies that it's just impossible for me to choose one. Until now. It's incredibly difficult to compare an animated movie to a live action, especially when the latter is a continuation of an ongoing TV series. So it would be unfair for me to question whether Reze arc is better than any of my other favorite movies. Different media emphasize different aspects. Demon Slayer series was carried solely for its art style and incredible fight scenes. Obviously, there are a shit ton of action movies which consist entirely of protagonists shooting the bad guys. But can you imagine a Marvel movie when two guys stand next to each other and power up for 10 fucking minutes or scheme at each other with 20 close-up in One Piece style? In addition, your perspective is filled through the movie being animated. Watching a character doing the most mundane shit in a regular movie is nothing special. But here you take into the consideration all the work that was put into it by animators who haven't seen their families for 5 Christmas Eves by now. So visuals naturally matter way more than in any other case. What I'm saying is that there is no foolproof way to compare any Western media to the Japanese one. However, what you can't measure, you can feel. The most important part of the movie is what it makes you feel right after leaving the theater. And I quite frankly must say that there was no other movie that had hit me so hard like it did. I can't remember any other one that has taken me for such wild ride. From laughing like a maniac, to the wholesome scenes, to the absolute psychedelic LSD bad trip, to the most epic fight scenes in the history of the cinema, and to the pure depression. I can recall only a few times in my 22 years of life when any piece of media had made me feel that way. For games, it was Clair Obscur and Phantom Liberty. For books, probably The Poppy War, Mistborn, Stormlight Archive and Ender's Game. And for manga and anime, it was only Attack on Titan. But somehow, for a movie, never happened. It was harder for me to feel it since you objectively spend way less time on a movie. They are on average 1.5 hours long, whenever in order to finish a book, a game or a TV series, those are sometimes tens of hours. And yeah, this is slightly cheating since it's a continuation of an already existing TV series. So there was no need of taking screen time for establishing a meaningful relationship with most of the cast. However, the most impactful character dynamic is between Reze and Denji, which is practically the heart of the movie. It was established solely within the realms of the movie, with no prior mentions of her before the movie release, apart from the 10-second teaser at the end of the anime, the existence of which I only learned about while writing this script. And even so, this is the most gut-wrenching and touching element of the movie. Even though it's the most beautiful piece of animation I have ever seen so far, with one of the best OSTs in the genre, this is the actual clue of the movie, which is easily forgotten when you are completely flabbergasted by the amount of explosions per second on the screen. Hell, the mad close-up is probably more detailed and took more time to animate the entire third season of One Frame Man, until the action suddenly comes to halt, the adrenaline wears off, and before you realize your entire psyche is in shambles. I believe that it might have been the closest I ever was to crying while consuming any piece of media. I generally try to refrain from major spoilers in my videos. Obviously, it's impossible to not include even minor details about the game whenever talking about it. However, it's difficult for me to apply that rule to a movie, especially the one that changes its identity so quickly throughout the screening. Additionally, I do not believe that this approach is enough to give the film its deserved justice, and I really want to fanboy and go over some of the more interesting aspects without the inclusion of a non-spoiler review factor. But by some miracle, if you have not watched it yet, I'm fairly certain it's already available on some of the major streaming services, so this is the moment to close this video and do it now. If you have seen this series, it's practically a must-watch, and if you didn't, it's probably well worth to straight up watch the anime just so you can get to this movie. Trust me, you won't regret it. Okay, so with that out of the way, instead of repeating all over that this movie is incredible, I would like to slow things down and break down why it works so well even though it does not reinvent the well-known formula. The ﷺ Man movie starts at the same time right where the anime left off, and quite literally at that. It opens with a scene of Denji being told not to open those weird doors at the end of a creepy corridor, and then him waking up, which is the same exact way as the last ending ended. I was supposed to rewrite this far. The trio is wearing the same exact clothes and they are lying in the same exact position. Even the damn tableware and the trash lying around after the all-nightly beige is roughly in the same place. And therefore, the scene of Aki smoking on the balcony takes place during the same night, which implies that he woke up in the middle of the night, decided to get up, went for a smoke, reflected on the past, nonchalantly watched the night sky in silence, and then instead of going to bed, got it on Denji's feet and dozed off again. And I only realized that while making this video, and it seemed so funny for me that for some reason I had to mention it. Then they proceed to absolutely flex on us with one of the best openings I have ever seen. And they do not pull their punches from the very beginning. It's the wildest mix of styles I have ever seen, filled to the brim with various references to pop culture and manga. A homage to a Satan descent from Constantine, funnily enough done by the Angel Devil, a Serving Private Ryan graveyard scene reference, Leon the Professional grenade scene Easter egg, a Pochita arcade game team dancing part, which we manga readers refer to we all know what scene, and those are only a few I just noticed or stumbled upon online. There are two things I believe the movie does exceptionally well. The first are the subtle details that make your next watch even better than the first one. And the second is the ease with which it changes its identity and how it seamlessly does it. First, around 20 minutes of a screening is made solely to give you a false sense of what kind of a movie you are watching. A slice of life with comedic elements detailing how an average day looks for the squad, with focus shifting entirely to Denji's point of view for the most part. We can see the usual amount of horniness typical for a ﷺ Man movie, his date with Magima in the theater, which leaves both him and the viewer happier than usual, and I'm 100% sure nothing is going to spoil it, right? Right? By the way, one of those guys wears a t-shirt with Scout Regiment log, which makes me really happy as an AOT fan. My personal favorite added detail that weren't in the manga, and I specifically read it again just to make sure, happens when he meets Reze for the first time. Denji's magic trick might as well be a real wizard spell, since it quite literally saved his life. Well, that and the fact that his face looks like a dead dog's. And although I can't really see the resemblance, but if a girl looking like her calls you a dog, then you might as well bark. You see how when she enters the cabin, she visibly rubs her neck. And the first time you see it, you treat it as a sign of nervousness and awkwardness, and you shrug it off. You don't even acknowledge it, since why the fuck would you? But then you realize that she needs to pull the pin at this exact place in order to transform, which is made painfully clear during the ending. So it means that she was ready to blow off Denji right then and there doing their first ďᵉᵃ, which is true in more ways than one if you think about it. I like this detail so much because it has some really interesting connotations. During the movie we see Denji and ̍Reze bond and gradually fall in love, until the scene when she asks him to run away with her. First, we think that it was all just a bluff made in order to isolate him, but after the credits we are not so sure anymore. Her offer most likely was genuine at that time. After all the time they spent together, she had to force herself to act. But it implied that everything she had done before was in order to wear Denji down and make him less suspicious, but when push came to shove, she couldn't finish it and practically begged him to convince her not to. But this makes you think, why wait? We clearly see she doesn't care about casualties. Yes, she tried to minimize them, but it didn't stop her from persuading her goal in the end. So, the thing is, she didn't. The moment she met him, she planned to kill him, but it turned out not to be so easy. She invited him to a cafe, the meetings, the yapping, learning together, everything they did during the festival, the pulsing, it was all genuine. She did not change her mind at any point. She did that only when he refused the proposal. That's when she opted for what she was planning before meeting him. Not at any point during their interactions after the first scene, killing him was a default option. Sure, she prepared for that with the whole typhoon deal, but I believe that was the plan B, not the other way around. On the other hand, we have a scene of Spider entangling a fly, which was also not in the manga, mind you. I believe it meant Denji slowly getting lured into a trap set up by ̍Reze, but if she did not mean to kill him back then, the meaning would be lost. But you might as well interpret it as the circumstances entrapping them both. Denji is living the worst life possible, having to kill demons for mere pennies in order to pay his dead father's debt, almost dying and then ending up practically owned by devil hunters. ̍Reze, abducted as a child, never meeting her parent, experimented on by Russians in order to be turned into a living weapon, never meeting anyone close to her, and ended up working for a gun devil, ultimately dying minutes after learning how to be happy. The parallel is crazy. Neither one of them had really known what happiness felt like, and both were kind of victims of their own circumstances. Both too valuable to be left alone and letting them live what should ultimately be the happiest years of their life. I believe this short period of time Denji spent with Power and Aki is what ultimately shaped him to a relatively good person. If the situation had flipped, it's not that hard to imagine Denji doing the same things ̍Reze has done. Why I believe that ̍Reze had it even worse is because she had known about the existence of all the things she was never supposed to have. It's fair to assume she was trained well to pretend and portray emotions while not being permitted to actually feel them. Denji's life wasn't easy for sure, but he never knew better. That's why he was so confused when she told him that half of the stuff they did him was borderline illegal. He had no idea, he couldn't even fucking read. That's the whole deal with the city mouse. At first, it seemed weird to me that Denji had chosen it. He was the last person that I would imagine have great ambitions if all he wanted to do is eat good food and fuck. But now that I think about it, it makes perfect sense. Denji had believed he already is a city mouse, that he has everything he can need. A roof under his head, a coworker that he finally starts to be able to talk to without her literally trying to kill him, 3 meals a day and 1 date in his entire life. He simply didn't know it could get any better. I bet that whenever he managed to eat twice in a single day in his past, he also believed he got the city mouse treatment. But ̍Reze knew about how big the world is, how many possibilities it offers, and knew that neither one of them is ever going to be available for her. That's why they were a perfect match. What was a country mouse for her was a city mouse for him. Watching it again and again is like seeing a car accident unfold every single time and hoping something would change. That he finally agrees to go with her, which probably would be better for every single individual in Chainsaw Man cinematic universe if he did. But at least, on the bright side, we got to watch over an hour of constant dopamine explosion during the fight. And holy fuck, what a fight that was! It almost makes you happy that all the characters are miserable just because you can see them beat up each other with style. This is what I mean, the movie does so much in short span, but weirdly it manages to perform in every single aspect. The action scenes do not lack. Both the animation as well as the choreography is absolutely nuts. The first part of the movie is animated so well, they didn't need to go so hard. Yes, Mr. Mappa Boss sir, it is necessary for the matte close-up to get more budget than the entire of JJK Season 2, trust me. It is not only animated very well, but it's also very creative. The color palette changes every second impact frame, and they are packing it with references. One explosion is the same exact color as the first ever released Chainsaw Man volume. They are constantly experimented with what they can get away with, and the choreography is really good. I've gone back and rechecked it. She did not do any of this shit in the manga. She is utilizing her powers to a full extent, and poor Beam did not deserve this JoJo ass style beatdown he got. Kudos to him though for surviving this shit. It's really hard to explain, you just gotta see it. And after all the insane action, there comes the final part, the sad. The audacity to play the remixed in the pool version during the sea descent incident. The last part reminds you what kind of movie you are watching. ṟ wants really hard to convince Denji that everything they had before isn't real, while failing miserably to do so, cause we all know the truth. Sadly, Fujimoto is not the one to go for a happy ending. He likes a little bit of trolling though, and right before the final reunion, she gets brutally executed by the redhead bitch. And I never went to school neither line low-key almost made me cry. I think I've listened to an ending song, actually the entire OST on Spotify at least 100 times already. So much so that while rewatching it the second time, the first thing that came to mind when hearing it is original soundtrack rather than the actual scenes from the movie. It's already available on Prime Video, it's not cheap, but it's really worth it. Or you just do it the another usual way you probably do. I'm telling you, just go f***ing watch it. Hades 2 has easily been one of my best discoveries this year, and I've bought it to various recommendations. I did play the first title, although not much. I've managed to beat the final boss of the game, Hades, the Greek god Hades, who's the sole ruler of land of Hades, and now I've exhausted all my supply of this world. I will need to speak like a caveman for the rest of this section. But I've never managed to get the true ending and never fought the upgraded version of the bosses. Mostly because the roguelikes were never my kind of games. I hate the idea of losing progress, that's why I never had fun in games like Rust, Tarkov and other roguelike style games for that matter. I'm a kind of guy who plays Minecraft and keep inventory for Christ's sake. But even though it's not essentially a genre created for me, it doesn't mean that some games cannot be an exception to this rule. Cause it did happen with The Binding of Isaac or Balatro for instance, and it's happening right now too. Although the game is a direct continuation, playing the first title is not necessary. It helps you understand certain events, but the premise is very simple. Zagreus is a son of Hades. Zagreus doesn't like living in the underworld. Zagreus has dad issues, wants to get the fuck out of there as fast as possible and meet his mommy. Hades does not like that. Zagreus doesn't like that. So he beats the shit out of his father and meets his mom on the surface 8 times. Some shenanigans ensue and then they make up. They live happily ever after, and Zagreus gets hired by his father to beat the shit out of him, until the old fart time comes, snaps his fingers and grabs everybody. And then suddenly it turns out Hades had a second daughter hidden in the woods all this time, and her only job in existence is to beat the shit out of Grandpa Clock, death to Kronos, etc, etc. The plot isn't very complicated, which isn't a bad thing. The premise is simple but detailed in terms of the amount of dialogues available. It has a surprisingly developed relation system with most of the available characters that we meet through the game. Characters obviously from a Greek mythology, and the game is pretty accurate to the source material, including the over-exaggerated impact of Melinwa and Zagreus on the plot. And aside from the fact that every single god in the mythology was a terrible person and fucked everything that moved, but I don't think that would work in this setting. At least to my knowledge, that comes from Percy Jackson book series, which is not probably the most reliable source, but from what I can tell, it was pretty similar. But yes, lore. Let's be honest, no one plays this game for a story. Yeah, I'm glad it's there, but it's a roguelike, not a typical one, but a roguelike nevertheless. No one would play it if the gameplay loop wasn't enjoyable, and since I'm here talking about it with 60 playtime hours, you can probably guess that it very much is. You choose one of the unlockable weapons from the arsenal, spin down or up. Collect various boons from gods which serve as a permanent upgrades to either one of your moves during the run, which consists of a primary attack, special which is a projectile for most weapons, a slowing cast or a generic dash. You try to make the most broken combo with different synergies between the Olympians. Fight everything the fallen titan throws at us, perish inevitably, get stronger, fight, die and repeat. You know, the usual roguelike experience. and it's real fucking addicting. Character movement is very fluent. Pretty much every single attack in the game is dodgeable, even those that you would pretty much not expect to be so. And unlike like in the first part, I find every single weapon available really fun. Well, maybe not every single aspect, but nevertheless I find the arsenal in the sequel simply superior. Oh, aspects. Yeah, aspects. The game offers you 5 weapons. Not from the start, but you can get there while gathering various materials after every single ass whoop. Then, after some time, you unlock the ability to alter the way those weapons are played. Movesets are mostly the same, but the way they are played and built varies a lot depending on what you choose. For example, Axe is a slow hitting weapon, so personally I like to go for a Hephaestus since his upgrades gives you a really strong first attack in your combo with cooldown depending on the rarity. Which is good since you are not going to spam a lot with this weapon anyway. Or because large numbers go boom, go for Aphrodite, who has an upgrade that increases the damage to nearby enemies for an absurd amount, and since it's a melee weapon, then obviously you are going to stay on their face 24/7. And in addition to that, I believe her legendary boon is the best in the game by far. But when you unlock an aspect of Thanatos, you can increase the attack speed and build up critical chances after every single consecutive hit without getting hit up to 20%, which then you can be more inclined to go for a charge attack build because it hits multiple times. And it becomes even more broken if you get an upgrade that allows you to do all the other moves while casting it. Then you can go for the classic Zeus Giga Chat broken build. Take a keepsake that reduces your health to a certain threshold but gives you more critical rate. Build around attack speed and be absolute terrorist with this glass cannon build. The possibilities are practically endless. Every single Olympian has a synergy boon that has a chance to appear when you have 2 certain boons in your possession from 2 different gods. You've enhanced your base attack with Hestia for them to deal damage with burn over time, and you have a Poseidon build that allows your attack to apply froth and knock away your enemies with splash waves. Then, if you're lucky, you can get the duo boon that makes your attacks immediately detonate the stacked burn and turn it into insta damage effect instead of it being applied over time. I've spent quite a long time on this game as of today. My personal record is 37 fear runs, and I'll explain what it is just in a while, just give me a second. And I've beaten the game with a build oriented around every single Olympian individually, and I can safely say this is one of the best balanced games I've played for a long time. Quite frankly, there is no bad build if you know how to pull it off. Every time I've got a buff from a god that I haven't been looking for and start to get angry, I was surprised and went like, this shit is actually pretty good. Then I've made a build around it and proceed to demolish everything on my path. You can get bad RNG and just receive only the sucky boons from every individual character, but shit happens, it's a roguelike, what you're gonna do. But on average, every single run can have something going for it. Sure, if you watch the higher tier gameplay, pretty much every single player just spams the fuck out of Zeus, since it's pretty much the most broken for majority of weapons, but you can make everything work up to a certain degree. Any single build can win you a game until you get to the Oath of the Unseen, that is. And let me just go out and say it, I love the approach to the difficulty system within the game. After some point of the game you unlock something called the Fear system, as I've mentioned earlier. It essentially is a modifier system that allows you to turn up the difficulty through various options in order to receive better rewards or just simply for the shits and giggles. There are a bunch of options there. Increased enemy movement speed, making every single enemy leave a shade that needs to be killed in order for them to stop from respawning. A perk system that makes some foes have additional buffs not present in the base game. All of them have another shield that needs to be taken down in order to deal damage, or even the existence of the Pact of Rivals, which is also a modifier, but depending on how you set it up, the corresponding number of main bosses is completely revamped. So if you stack it up to the max, it means that every single one of the 4 location bosses is not only buffed, but it has completely different moveset, looks different, has different voice lines and reasons to fight you, and a lot of them straight up add another unique boss to the fight at the same time. And all of this shit is multiplicative. This is the fear system. Every single modifier you choose adds some points to the fear bar. The highest achievement the game acknowledges is 32 fear, and all above that is practically just straight masochism for the love of the game. My personal record is 37, but I have fucked up multiple 40 above runs on the final boss. But the max the game allows you to go is 67. And it's absolutely mental. As far as I'm concerned, only a few people in the world had managed to do it till this day. It already sounds pretty ridiculous, but what makes it the most fucked up is those last 5 fear points. You would think that 6-2 fear is comparably difficult to 6-7 fear, but no, it's not even close. And it's all because of this bastard. Vow of the Void, I fucking hate you. Because you see, after every single failed run, you get some materials which allow you to get stronger, like in the usual roguelike fashion. And by far, the most impactful change is the Arcana card system. It's a set of cards activated before the run that gives you an insane boost. At max level, you have 30 points to spend and you can take stuff such as free revives during your run, 50% more damage dealt, 40 health and mana from the beginning, constant mana regeneration, bonus 300 starting gold, dices that allow you to reroll any reward you get during the run, 20% less damage taken. You get the gist. However, what Vow of the Wild does is that it disables respectively 40%, 60%, 80% and 100% of your Arcana card access. Which means that in addition to every single debuff I've mentioned, you are literally playing as a naked Fortnite default skin every run that you've started the game with 60 hours before, excluding the weapon upgrades and keepsakes, which are talismans you can start the run with to guarantee the starting board or increase to some rarity. Which is good, don't get me wrong, however it's nowhere close to what you get from the Arcana card system. So you can probably understand now why every single player just spams the skull and those moons for the entirety of the game. But for 99% of us mortals, this is absolutely irrelevant, because those micro differences don't become noticeable unless you are Hades to Jesus. It's way more fun to just wing it and try to make the goofiest, weirdest and unique build that will work either way if you put enough time into learning the mechanics. And it gives you a lot of ways to do that. One of my favorite mechanics in the game is called the Fate Swim, because after some point in the game you can have two major alternate playstyles. You can one, either stack up on dices that allow you to roll rewards to go for specific builds, or if you don't take even a single one, then you are at what the game calls Fate Swim. This allows you to take some items before the run even starts that limit your option to affect the game's RNG. However, it makes all the encountered items on average way better. And every single boon that you encounter can be 3 levels higher or have an increased chance to be the higher rarity. However, in order to unlock this, you need to beat the main story. And by beat, I don't mean just win the fight with the final boss. No, you need to beat him a couple of times, grant the relations and do the same stuff all over again. I know it's a weird point to make against a roguelike type game. However, my complaint is that most of the progress you make in this game depends on time spent in it, not the player's achievements. It's honestly probably my one issue with it. Besides the Steven Universe type shit ending, which I absolutely hate, but I'm not going to get into that in this video and I haven't paid much attention to this game's story anyway. The constant grind is a vital part of every game from this genre. However, most games hide their unlockable content under some conditions that need to be fulfilled. In Isaac, for instance, the items are locked by either separate challenges or checkmarks that are completed by beating a certain boss with a certain character. In Enter the Gungeon you have to beat the stage 5 boss once, but then in order to progress you need to gather various parts of a bullet on different stages to progress. My point is that the only one thing that restricts you is your skill level. Those games take so long to complete 100% because they are difficult. It takes a lot of time to get necessary upgrades and knowledge to progress. However, it just makes it easier, not accessible in the first place. But in Hades, I just felt like it's an artificial and completely unnecessary way to increase the game length. For example, on your first playthrough, the hoe always appears at the beginning to give you 20% damage received debuff, just because they want you to die on your first playthrough instead of achieving any significant progress. And she doesn't appear only once. Every time you reach a location you haven't been to before, she just spawns and makes sure you won't progress 2 locations at the same time. What the fuck is the point of that? I don't get it. Well, remember the Vow of Rivals that I've mentioned before, which completely revamps bosses and makes the game way more interesting? Well, in order to unlock it, you have to beat the easiest boss in the game 1,000,000 times until she suddenly tells you about this random ass thing. I have never managed to die while fighting her since I started playing this game. So why would the condition for most of the content be just repeating the same easy task just to get to it? This part felt like a cookie clicker, not a roguelike. The Vow of Rivals is locked behind her, the Oath of the Unseen is locked behind her, the pets are, and even the Arcana card upgrades, I think. And what does the game give you for the actual hardest parts? Well, for the aforementioned 32 fear run, all you get is a fucking statue that looks at you and rubs it in your face. And at some point in the game, I seriously considered installing some full unlock mods, since higher fear runs are way more difficult without some specialistic setups and builds, which I couldn't get simply because I haven't beaten the pretty much tutorial boss equivalent another 10 more times. But in the end, it's just me complaining about the reward system, which is not the most important part of the game, but just a macro stuff. The core gameplay is really good after all, and I haven't even talked about it being quite frankly twice as large as the previous game due to the existence of 2 dungeons instead of 1, or the fact that even after 60 hours of playtime, any dialogue in the game has not even repeated yet. Honestly, the best banger Supergiant games have produced up to this day, and most of the games were pretty good, so that's a high praise. If you ever enjoyed any roguelike, you will for sure fall in love with this one. Death to Kronos and shit.
Why, thank you.
Out of all the crazy things that happened this year, this takes the prize by far and for so many reasons. I believe I don't need to explain what Silksong is to all of you, unless you've lived under a rock for the past couple of years, or the only game series you've played exclusively is FIFA, and even then I probably wouldn't believe you. It has been by far the most anticipated indie game premiere of all time, and probably one of the most anticipated game premieres in general of all time. Anticipated might not even be the right word, since at some point we stopped anticipating and just started coping, but when it was finally released, still can't believe I'm saying it by the way, it caused, for the first time that I know of at least, a Steam client server crash on a release day. A large majority of the player base wasn't even able to buy the game during the initial launch. They had to just spam the checkout page for hours and hours without end. It's really funny looking back at it, but believe me, it was not pleasant sitting on your ass and clicking the green button every second just to see those buster blobs extinguish all your hope. I've already made a video where I've dove more onto what Silksong is, so most of the stuff I've said back then still holds up, so if you want to hear more in-depth analysis, go watch this. But since I've enjoyed it too much, I'm down to making my case again. The fact that the game has even been released after all the years of doubt and community absolutely losing its mind is insane. But what's even more insane is how good it actually is. Because normally when a game is being developed for such a long time, it usually indicates various problems during the creation process. Constant changes of the main direction is usually not a good thing. However, contrary to what we were all thinking during those years, somehow Silksong had no problems during the development? Just had too much fun making it, that's why it took them so long. Well, I'm not sure to what extent should I believe that, because if that would be the case, couldn't they just, I don't know, mention it instead of torturing us all this time? But the silken lining is that at least they've made a pretty good fucking game. We are already past the Game Awards, and Silksong had not managed to win it, although it was a pretty close call. But at least they've won the Steam Game of the Year award, which is equally as impactful since it's decided solely by players. And to some extent, I do agree with this decision. Silksong manages to one-up Hollow Knight in pretty much every department. I can decide which one I like more simply because of all the hours I've spent on previous title. But in order to give credit where credit is due, Silksong is just a better game in my opinion. Although it lacks pantheons, but I'm sure it'll come with time. The visuals are absolutely stunning. They've managed to keep simplistic style from the previous iteration while just upgrading it. The very first location you spawn in is prettier than any single one from Hollow Knight. The same goes for music. Christopher Larkin managed to outdone himself and make it even better than previously. It's another OST that has been played constantly on repeat after I finished the game. I'm even listening to it as of now while making this video. Not its in entirety obviously, but Mos Grotto is the perfect lo-fi chill radio equivalent ideal for background music. But OST and graphics, even though they play some kind of role in the game, are obviously not the most important aspect of it. Gameplay is, and holy shit, it's good. And it's good from the very beginning in contrast to its predecessor. Let's be honest, you started having fun in Hollow Knight only after at least you got a dash ability. Because pretty much everything you do up until that point is walk forward, smack, walk backward, repeat. And I don't know why, but even though the premise is the same, it somehow feels better here? I've started a couple of new playthroughs for the sake of this recording, and even after being stripped from all the broken shit you get in the endgame, I still enjoyed it. The combat is way more intriguing. You can gather silk in order to cast various skills, such as throwing a spear, doing the judgment, cutting someone, or what a Pokebear likes the most, parring. You're able to utilize shards in order to use multiple tools that can do a lot of cool stuff, starting from just throwing stuff to setting up traps, healing, or buffing. You can also hold your attack, which you are probably never going to do, sprint and then leap high into the sky, or you can even heal mid-air to avoid the interruptions. Pogo mechanic comes back, but it's diagonal this time. Well, if you have the default style crest, because the game even allows you to change your moveset. You can go back to the same style of attacking like in Hollow Knight, or fuck it and go full berserk style. Jumps come back as tools and do pretty much the same thing, and one of them literally allows you to turn into Hakari and instead of actually fighting the boss, give the wheel to Jesus and gamble your mortgage while being immortal for 5 minutes and 11 seconds. Oh, and have I mentioned this game has a literal grappling hook? And as Ultra Kill taught me, every game benefits from an addition of a grappling hook. All that it's missing is giving Hornet a literal fucking gun. Oh! 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 Yeah, there is a lot of stuff, and all these additions probably make the game way easier than its predecessor, right? Silksong is not, by any means, an easy game, which is something completely unexpected quite frankly, since I believe that the first game was not that hard. It had difficult challenges like all the Pantheons, however majority of the game wasn't difficult to complete. So Silksong being so bullshitty was quite unexpected. Especially after the point where 90% of the encounters have enemies that deal 2 fucking masks of damage. And just a friendly reminder that the first boss that deals 2 masks of damage in the first iteration is fucking Radiance. So the literal last boss of the base game. Fortunately, most of the difficulty in the game is actually pretty fair, and most of your deaths are due to imperfect play, not an unfortunate RNG. Well, while excluding the most tilting location that I have ever stumbled upon on my gaming journey, and this son of a whore mosquito. But besides that, practically all encounters don't feel like filler bosses that are just pasted to artificially increase the game length. Every boss fight in the game feels some way unique and has a thing going for him. The game is really good at making every location feel unique and has its own theme. It does not reuse assets or ideas at all. When I've come back to playing other titles after finishing Silksong, I started to notice how frequently other titles reuse enemies and exploit previously established ideas to full extent. And it's completely fair because that's one of the most basic principles of game design. You introduce a player to a new mechanic, you let him have a little fun with it, and then slowly as the game progresses, complicate it with the addition of previously established mechanics. Silksong does that too, but they do that during the course of a singular location. I can't count how many times I've said to myself, oh, that's a really fun mechanic. And then they proceed to absolutely never use it again, because it was replaced by another equally interesting idea. It's a neat detail that you don't realize while initially playing the game. I've recently replayed Metal Gear Rising, and don't get me wrong, I still believe it's an incredible game, but I've started paying attention to how frequently you fought the same group of enemies. The same deal goes for Devil May Cry 5, Nier Automata, etc. All incredible games, and yes, they are noticeably more difficult to make since those are 3D AAA titles, but I'm simply pointing out that it's refreshing to see this particular approach, and I want everybody to appreciate the love that was put into this game. The second, and especially the third act of this game is where it truly becomes peak. From the moment I've played it first, I've wondered if we're going to acquire a dream nail in the game, and although we don't, we get something even better. Needle allows us to make practically any NPC in the game sing in order to get some new dialogues from him, or use it on the enemies to bind them and also get some unique exchanges. And I haven't encountered a single enemy in the game that's not susceptible to it. And further down the line, it gets the Dream Nail at Home ability, which by some weird magic-y way allows us to enter the past memories of certain characters in order to explore unique locations that house the Great Lords, which are the most badass bosses in the game. It's also used for opening many secrets in the game, and I'm sure I have not discovered even half of them on my first playthrough. And just when you think you beat the games, it pulls us some Nier Automata / Undertale play and pulls you back with a "nah, you're only halfway down the line" move. Sadly, it also suffers the same fate as a lot of the high skill ceiling games do. The end game is by far easier than the beginning. When you do most of the side quests, actively search for all the masks, needle oils, and sit on the bench for 10 minutes calculating and testing what kind of build is going to explode enemy balls faster, the game becomes way easier, simply because the sheer amount of upgrade allows you to make much more mistakes. I shit you not, I beat the final boss on the third try, but Savage Beastplay took me almost 2 hours. But even so, it was the most enjoyable part of the game. Using 4 different moves to launch yourself into the stratosphere just to jiggle with 3 different inputs at the same time to stay in the air for the entire fight just tingles your brain the right way. You couldn't do that cool shit in Hollow Knight unless you are some of the absolute beasts that have thousands of hours into it. But there is one thing that makes me sad after the premiere. And it's the thought that the poor guy from Daily Silksong News has become unemployed just like the rest of us. But after giving it some thought, maybe that's just alright. After all the dedication that doing what he did took, he deserves to receive some rest and a moment of well-earned peace. Oh, you got to be f***ing kidding me.
You should probably do it before they wither and die.
You're fighting to change things.
I'm here.
I know.
We're the only ones left. You don't get to die.
Come on, we always said the future of Lumiere is more important than
Any individual life, yes.
Do you still believe that? Do you still believe that? Do you?
I hope I do.
So, at the beginning I've stated that the order in this video is structured strictly random and there is no point reading into it. Well, fellas, sadly I have to come clean. I fucking lied. I just couldn't stop myself and saved the best for last. I don't know how good of an idea that is, since I have no clue how many people reached this point, but I just had to do that. Because the moment the credits came, I already knew that there is absolutely no way I'm not making a video about it. Sadly, the timing wasn't the best, since I was solely focused on creating Marvel Rivals content at that time, and had no room for that sort of video on my main channel. But the game had such a strong impact on my emotional state that I just had to find a way to talk about it. All of the games I mentioned in this video had 100% deserved the Game of the Year award, if they came out in any different year. If Silksong was released in 2024, it would not have even been a competition, it would have been a slaughter. But what can I say? We've all eaten well this year, but I'm sorry, the Game of the Year has already come out during the first quarter, and for me personally, it wasn't even close. I could not imagine what game could possibly beat it to first place, and even when literal Holy Grail has been just randomly dropped like a nuke during the end of the year, for me it wasn't even a competition still. It has been nominated into 12 awards and absolutely swept the competition and won 9 of those. It did not unfortunately win the Steam Awards, but it went to the second most deserving candidate, which is Silksong, and I cannot be mad at that. It might have even been better, since it means that both masterpieces have been appreciated to some degree. And then there is Indie Game Awards incident, which is quite a layered topic, but I just need to say something about it or I'm going to explode. So, for all those who do not know what I'm talking about, the main prize has been awarded to Blueprints, a mix of roguelike and a puzzle game. I have not played it, but from what I heard, it's a really good game. But even if Expedition 33 was disqualified, does it really outclass Silksong? I don't know, not my place to judge it, I'll leave it up to you. But the reason it was disqualified in the first place was due to a usage of generative AI. But the only thing AI was used during the production process was creating placeholders to later be replaced. This mistake was quickly fixed, but it sparked some major controversies and quickly labeled Clair Obscur as AI slope. Okay, to be fair, one of the conditions of participating was refraining from using any part of generative AI during the production process. So they had full right to do that and disqualified them, and it wasn't cool for the developers to not inform about it. What causes my problem is that the stupid condition even exists, or at least in the way it was written. Because what the fuck does using AI mean? Literally nothing major was made with it. Actually, quite frankly, nothing was made with it, because all they did was use it in order to help them illustrate their vision with placeholders. The fact that it even made into the game wasn't even intentional. I can understand the anti-AI agenda from the point of view of artists, developers, musicians and other creativity-related jobs, since the probability of AI replacing a large part of their job is very high. However, call me a bad person, but I'm a realist. If you believe the multi-million-dollar companies are going to refrain from using the tool that is going to decrease their cost tenfold for 1% of people who are actually able to discern AI from handmade, then I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen. This ship has already sailed. Any big tech company you can think of has invested billions into it, and basically in no one's interest is to stop the progress. The frequent argument is the danger caused by all kinds of deepfakes, and that governments are going to do something someday to take care of it. Yeah, maybe, but they won't stop its progress, just enforce them to declare what's AI and what's not. It will be used in movies, games, music, graphics, pretty much everywhere. I'm not saying it will replace everything, but it's going to be obviously utilized to some degree. So the best that people can do right now is to learn how to apply it to optimize their workflow without endangering the creative flow. And utilizing generative AI for placeholder creation is quite frankly the best possible example I could think of. And calling it AI slope because of it just doesn't make any sense. This f***ing video is an AI slope then, since I use ChatGPT to translate Polish idioms to its English equivalent, since Google Translate can't do that for shit. And tearing developers apart because they adapt to how the world changes isn't going to make your case better. If the next company who would like to optimize their work with AI is going to be put in the same bag as the one saying it as fully AI-generated crypto scam game, then they just won't going to bother. If they are not going to be appreciated either way, they might just as well generate everything. It doesn't change the fact that Clair Obscur is a masterpiece. I personally not only believe it's the best game of 2025, but the best game I have played in my entire life. Even though I do not believe in a 10 out of 10 game, it just doesn't exist. 10 out of 10 for me means that every single thing needs to be perfect, and perfection is something you strive for, not achieve. But if I ever had to point one title, one game that has been the closest to achieving this unreachable status, it has to be Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Ladies and gentlemen, I present you the first 9.999 out of 10 game in the history. One of the prizes Clair Obscur had won was the best game direction, one which is awarded for recognizing the game judge for outstanding creative vision and innovation in game direction and design. At first glance, it seems far-fetched, and I had the same idea for the first time when I saw the game. Many people labeled the combat as just another Persona clone, and from a visual standpoint, it's true to some degree. The menuing in this game looks like it was ripped straight from it. You know what they say, if you're gonna steal, steal from the best. Well, I say steal, but I don't really think that's the case here. The video game industry is, whether you believe it or not, already 60 years old. And making something completely new that is going to reinvent the way we think is not really plausible. I remember when Overwatch was first announced, everybody said it's just a shameless TF2 clone just because the genre was the same. Fortnite was called a poor man's PUBG, which is weird since before it, PUBG was just a H1Z1 copy. Valorant is a Counter-Strike clone. Hearthstone was a Magic equivalent for people too stupid to play it, with the same rule applying to Dota and League. Brawlhalla and Multiverse is just Smash Bros, but for people without Nintendo. And do any Dead by Daylight players even remember Evolve Stage 2? Cause I do. At this point, Cyberpunk might as well be a shameless Quake lookalike since you aim with your mouse and shoot guns. You have advanced to a point where similarities are inevitable. Innovation is no longer about flipping the table, but rearranging already existing pieces into something unique. And Clair Obscur does precisely that. It manages to take the best parts of action-oriented games and recombine it that it fits neatly into the turn-based combat system. The turn-based combat system is so good in fact that it doesn't even feel like turn-based at all. The animations in this game are done so well that actual menuing during the fight is even pleasant. It plays so well on the controller since every button just changes the menu in Persona's fashion. And doing your moves fast enough actually looks like you're comboing it, like in some Tekken or other Mortal Kombat. I've always hated quick time events, but weirdly enough they work here, since they're not really that difficult and are just there to keep you on the edge constantly during the fight, and if you don't like it, you can just turn them off. Although it's not where the combat shines, because the game introduces a unique mechanic that actually makes it feel more like a Souls-like than a tactical game. Because you can respond to the enemy attacks during his turn. You can dodge the attacks to not take any damage or parry them, which gives you additional action points and allows for a counter, but has obviously a tighter window to do it properly. Sometimes enemies attack a single teammate, or sometimes the entire expedition, which forces you to jump above their attacks. Or they can use extremely powerful attacks, only counterable with gradient parry. Explaining it makes it seem like just another QuickTime event, but just done during the enemy turn, which cannot be further from the truth. Most boss fights feel like an Elden Ring type fights, and in order to fully appreciate it, I highly encourage everybody to play it on hard difficulty, since parrying and dodging on normal feels more like a gimmick than actual necessary mechanic needed to complete the game. And with the amazing visual and audio design, executing parries is extremely satisfying whenever you tune into the right rhythm. The combat seemed so fluent for me that my ADHD could not handle it, and I frequently used the wrong moves because I was focused more on doing my moves as fast as I can. Just for my character to hit them trick shots. In a turn-based game, mind you. It has easily become one of my favorite combat systems I've ever stumbled upon. It won't beat Dark Souls combat for me since it's something I grew up with, but it's surely one of my top picks while having one major advantage over Souls games, which is a coherent story that can be followed by an actual human being without the need to watch VatiVidya videos to know what you're looking at. And goddamn, what a story that was. I understand why some people are questioning the Game Direction Award. I can see where that conversation came from. But if you're talking about the Best Narrative Award, I will die on this hill and go down swinging like a maniac, sword in hand, before I concede that their claim to this prize is questionable. I've played a lot of story-oriented games in my past, but nothing ever came close to what Clair Obscur has done to me emotionally. Baldur's Gate 3, Witcher 3, Cyberpunk, The Walking Dead, Honeypop, Nier Automata, Disco Elysium, and still no ending had left me so broken in the end. Before I played the game, I watched a partial YouTube Let's Play up to the first boss, and then I decided that I just have to play it, cause it was going to be something special. One thing that had made it the most attractive for me, besides the best prologue I've ever seen, is the setting. I've always had a weakness for strong world building. I grew up with Sanderson novels, where the real hook, at least for me, was the intricate, well-established magic system and a detailed universe. For example, Allomancy from Last Empire series. It allowed mistlings and mistborns to burn or flare metals that come in 4 groupings of 4 metals: physical, mental, temporal, and enhancement. All in dystopian settings where plants are grey and ash falls from the sky, governed by an immortal lord ruler and steel-eyed inquisitors. Or the Stormlight Archive system that allowed Radiance to embrace fundamental forces of nature in the form of forming bonds with creatures known as friends based on their moral values. And both of those, along with a couple other worlds, are located in the same planetary system called Cosmere, with detailed history of all the events prior to the creation of the universe itself. You know, this sort of complicated shit. And Expedition 33 setting seems just so unique for me. The concept of a city trapped in the middle of an ocean, with a giant monument looming over in a distance with a numbered plaster on it. A number which changes with the help of an ominous godlike being who raises part of the population for some unknown reason every single year. It's such a mysterious and fresh concept, and the game juggles it so well. Along the course of the plot, it manages to reveal just enough parts of the canvas to make the story interesting, while still being mysterious and make players want to learn more. It almost makes you want to believe France is a real place. It never gives you any answer without raising even more questions, and that's my favorite way of storytelling. I love when the plot doesn't reveal everything at once, but allows you to slowly develop your theories as you progress. But on the other hand, I also hate when the games completely abandon the regular storytelling and hide the lore in obscure places like in Dark Souls fashion, or just pull FNAF and rely completely on some maniac to figure out it online. Personally, for me the best balance is struck when the story is mysterious, just to the point that it makes you question everything, but doesn't make you feel lost, and with a proper ending that dispels most doubts. And the game manages to do precisely that. Although the further you go, the more pointless having any theories about next events become. That at some point you just have to wing it, because putting it all together yourself is practically impossible. You can theorize about some aspects and get them right, but the complete painting is so fucked up that good luck to you, lol. All characters seem so well written and believable. At no point in the game I had a feeling that the protagonists I play as are idiots. Their motivations were understandable and actions to some degree justified, even if not commendable. And this applies to both sides of the conflict. Both our main cast and their adversaries have a clear goals they are willing to fight for, either to pursue them or protect them. From the outside, their actions can seem selfish, but once you step into their shoes, they become far easier to understand. And if you were in their position, you can't honestly say you'd choose better. Every expedition has its own reason why they joined the expedition and acts slightly different. Ciel seems like the calmest in the squad, yet she's also the loudest. She jokes the most and treats everything with distance the others don't. But it's obviously a facade, mask hiding something terrible that happened to her, and probably many more in this fucked up world. Lune is a daughter of 2 scholars who devoted her life to discovering the secrets of the monolith. An outsider who never got too close to anyone and shut down even more after her parents' death. Believing in greater, not individual good. Gustav is similar to her in many ways, or at least want to be. He is the genius star scientist that made the Lumina converter, who also prioritizes collective welfare over individual benefit. But unlike Lune, he has a lot more to lose, because his little sister Maëlle is also an expeditioner. A sister who still seems way too young for all of this. She feels trapped in Lumiere and wants to get out of there and explore the world. And sail towards the monolith more for the sake of the whole teenage self-discovery arc instead of saving the world. And even though she understands the risk, they don't really sink in until everything goes to shit. And the game doesn't explicitly tell you all of this. More concrete information about their backstories is given to us after progressing the relations level to a certain degree way down the line. It shows us this through the interactions between the characters themselves, not through the JoJo-style flashback that shows us the last century of a character's life 10 seconds before he died in hope that we finally start to give it. They notice the same thing we as a player do. They can argue and point out their other bullshit. Gustav, a guy who was first depicted as this shy, calm and collected scientist, brainlessly charging through every obstacle with disregard of his own safety, just clinging to a hope that he can maybe see his sister again, while also no longer caring for the expedition's success. Lune not being afraid to call him out, and rightfully so, that he's a hypocrite, that believed in the common good and was willing to sacrifice himself to give hope to Lumiere, but is afraid to come to terms with the fact that his sister was willing to take the same risk as him, and he rather sabotaged the mission than save one individual. Maëlle being completely clueless and carefree at the beginning, Chilling out with Gestals and Curator looking like the catastrophe from the start did not affect her in the slightest. Causing the poor Gustav to have a heart attack every 5 nanoseconds, who spends all his free time with her, trying to give her hope, whether he actually believes in the prospect of taking down Paintress or not. And all of this merely happens in the first part of Act 1. But if I won't talk about the events that transpire after Gustav finally unlocks his broken secondary skill set and what does it mean for this story, I'm going to tweak. So I'll give you some time to skip this timestamp, because I'm going to spoil the out of this game now. Everybody's gone? Finally! I hope you appreciated all the shit I've snuck into this video while trying real hard not to spoil anything before. On the other topic, I absolutely love Clair Obscur subreddit. And the way the community answers every "Hey guys, can't wait to unlock the rest of Gustav's skillset, he's my favorite character, how do I do that?" type post. Keep going and get ready, he's about to drop some bombs. Gustav is the man. Smiley face. Gustav's arm has a lot of story significance, so we need to progress the story. For now, the best way to utilize him is to get good at dodges and parries, so you can charge his arm up ASAP. NG plus 32, that's when you finally come after. Gustav gets a major upgrade in Act 2 and unlocks his skills then. He becomes more versatile.
Bonjour, je pense que vous faites erreur. Gustave ne fait
Just keep playing, but if you really want to know, his whole kit gets changed about 1/3 of the way through the game. Oh sweet, so I get a new skills for him later? Dope. Oh yeah, sure man, a bunch of new skills, it's awesome. He's going to come back when he finds out and murder you, lol. He does not understand it yet, but it's an act of kindness, yes. Of course, he's the main character. Later in the game you won't even need his arm, becomes practically useless. Might as well toss it under some tree. I like one of his skills named Got Stabbed, 1 shots and always crits. Dear Reddit users of this subreddit, you are the best. But in all seriousness, I absolutely love this artistic choice. It throws you completely off guard. At no point they give you any indications that they are just going to straight up murder the main character, not even halfway through the game. And all the metadata you can find is just used to throw you off. Is on every promotional material, while Verso, who is the main character for the majority of them, is not present in practically any. Your lady almost does Kurt Cobain at the beginning, so surely they won't kill him. Your lady almost died at the start, so if he had to die at some point, they surely kill him right then, right? Oh, there is no way Gustav dies. Look at his skill tree, there's still so much left to unlock. Even during the stone cliff scene, he gets pierced through the chest, making us go, oh fuck, no. But then turns out he somehow survives this using the power of plot armor. So surely they won't kill him right after we thought they killed him 10 seconds ago. It works so well and hits you like a Renoir cane to the back of the head. There is no way anyone could ever anticipate this. It's the most brilliant way of killing a meaningful character in any game I've ever played. It's an incredibly touching moment, but it's not even the saddest part of it, by long shot. His death is quick and abrupt, and it doesn't give neither us nor the characters any moment to breathe. Obviously, most of all, it impacts Mael. Immediately after her brother, who practically raised her, dies, she finally breaks, and understandably so. I see it as both poetic and ironic that she has to be taught the same lessons Gustav needed to relearn when confronted with cruel reality, not some grandiose slogans. That no matter how many of us fall, we gotta march on and pave the path for those who come after. Luckily, she gets to finally bury him and properly mourn her loss along with the rest of the expedition. Funeral scene has been a sort of a breaking point for me. I already knew this game was incredible, but this had managed to exalt it already to a status of one of the best games I've ever played. There is just something special to it. Everyone handles it differently. Lune tries to hold the moment together with grand words and bigger promises. Cyril is desperate to put a kinder frame around the pain, offering uplifting words, naively believing he's in a better place now. Maybe it's how awkward Mael is, how she doesn't know what to say and just lets the sentences stumble out, and how Verso just stands there, awkward and visibly distraught, contributing nothing, not knowing him enough for his input to seem valuable and genuine. How they shamelessly conditioned us to cry by using the same track song during the Sofia's Gomash and Gustav's funeral. A song that somehow manages to be uplifting and devastating at the same time. And it all becomes even more depressing when you look at it from a broader picture after finishing the game. How can something be so meaningful while ultimately in reality being so meaningless? And developers are clearly aware of this fact and are giving us a knowing nod by letting the camera rest on Verso for a moment, while Mael talks about Gustav as her brother. And ultimately, even that is not the saddest part. Everything that happens during the Act 4 is. I'll admit, I wasn't really much of a fan of a Matrix-type world reveal, but even so, I can respect that they have pulled it off quite amazingly, to be honest. The reveal absolutely broke me. It was the sole reason I've stated that there are no bad guys in this universe. Poor Renoir just doesn't want to let his wife and now even also his daughter die in a fantasy world that doesn't even exist. But on the other hand, everything I've mentioned happened in this non-existing fantasy world. Are all these complex characters, Sophia's and Gustav's death, all past expeditions, pointless? Why were we paving the path for those who come after if ultimately our goal is not only to halt the progress, but to kill all those poor people and put their memory in vain? And even if we hit the canvas, it's like the worst kind of drug. A drug that lets you reconnect with your lost loved ones and live in your perfect little fantasy practically as a god. You can't just hide the drug from an addict hoping that someday after the rehab he could start taking it in reasonable doses. Renoir's right. No matter how well he hits it, no matter if he flies to this world's equivalent of an Alaska and locks it in a safe, Alicia will find it. There doesn't seem to be a single good answer in this world, and what's worse, all of them seem like they are the bad ones. I could honestly dissect this game for hours, but most of this video is already Clair Obscur. Let me end on one last aspect, the thing that makes it a truly one-of-a-kind experience. Its sound and visual design. Describing it is difficult for me since I have no idea how words could do it justice. In terms of visuals, yes, the game is stunning, but not because of the graphics or animation quality, although those are good too. But it pulls it so well in a similar way it does everything else, due to the immense amount of creativity demonstrated by the dev team. Remember how I mentioned that Silksong doesn't pull its punches and develops a completely new mechanic for the sake of one location to then forget about it and replace it with something even better? Well, this game does it too, but with its graphics. Because in addition to main locations we travel along the game progression, there are tens of small ones that serve as one of mini locations that house some powerful enemies or mini bosses to fight, or some additional side quests or loot. But there are so many of those, and sometimes they completely do not resemble the bigger locations they are housed in, and in a good way. And it just feels like they wanted to show off. For example, the game has a lot of additional collectibles which you can gather just for shit and giggles. One of them being music records that you can play in your camp. So you are randomly exploring some older parts of the optional location you just got access to. You walk on the beach next to some broken ships, enter the mini area and see this. Only so you can just pick up a music disc. For f***'s sake, couldn't they just hid it under a rock? I've spent 5 minutes in this location because I legit couldn't believe they drew and animated all of it just to spawn one item on the ground. And wanna hear something better? This one-off-screen area that you are supposed to stay for 5 seconds has an original soundtrack heard nowhere else in the game that just fucked. And you would think that's just a waste of resources, right? Well, it might be true, but they clearly don't care. Surely the location called Sadness Cliffs, looking like that, will have some story significance. Nope, you just fight one mime here. Surely this berserk looking arena would at least have a mini-boss here. Nah, you will get a music record and be happy about it, got it? Surely I will have to fight this guy here, right? No, here's one collectible. Cheers. It's honestly incredible and the main locations are just as impressive. Flying Waters is one of my favorite locations ever. It's so creative and the enemies are just so cool. And yeah, the enemies design is also a really strong point of the game. Yeah, sadly they do reskin a lot of them later, but even so, there is a large pool of unique enemies with interesting designs. And different game mechanics that it doesn't seem so repetitive. And the music. Damn the music. I have no clue. How could I describe to you how good the OST is? I have no musical background, for fuck's sake, but just the sheer amount of tracks is baffling. The fact that some random mini-bosses and locations get their own unique soundtracks speaks for itself. I've listened to the full album multiple times before I actually even started playing the game because I liked it so much. And the fact I'm heavily influenced by the music I listened to probably was one of the main reasons why the ending practically made me cry. For the first time while playing a video game. In the past I was battling with the idea of even playing the game, but having listened to Lumiere around 100 times over the course of 1 month, I've decided that I just can't pass the opportunity of playing what I personally believe is the best game of all time. So, this is it. My honest opinion about the blessed 2025 year. This video took a long time to make, and I'd appreciate any feedback you guys can give me, whether a positive or a negative one. In the end, I had managed to talk only about 3 games and only 1 movie, which doesn't seem like a lot, but I really felt like I had to do proper justice to all of them. And even after finishing this script, I constantly remind myself of things that I haven't talked about. I have not complained enough about Hades 2 ending and how I believe it doesn't fit the story. I have not mentioned anything about the complex Lumina-based character build system in Clair Obscur, how I sometimes spent 2 hours in a game before moving my character an inch just to make sure Mael had 40 buffs active at the same time on turn 1. But also, I've not discussed any Expedition 33 flaws, which even though are not major are undoubtedly present, such as the artificial 10,000 damage cap present for a majority of the game, and how endgame content is pathetically easy if you spend even a little time grinding, and how Mael is so broken that I had to purposely kick her out of my party since all the challenges went out of the window. Which, by the way, after some time of writing this script, is not entirely true because the thank you update adds some absolutely fucked up bosses, which is hard even with the most broken build and even with most of the modifiers. So that argument is no longer relevant, and I also not managed to talk about any other games that deserve recognition, how this patch paved the road for a revival of a beloved Telltale type storytelling games, how Look Outside managed to apply the Fear and Hunger horror style game to the cosmic horror genre, Ark Riders finally became a first successful looter shooter Tarkov competition, Battlefield marking the comeback of a game series that was already considered a lost cause, Split Fiction somehow keeping the 2-game co-op genre alive by itself, Death Stranding being, I have no idea what, but people enjoyed it seems. Or the other titles such as Ghost of Yotei or Kingdom Come 2, which I have not played, so I can't rightfully judge, but some people would behead me if I would not mention those. My point being that this video is already excruciatingly long, but it's just the beginning of the year and I have no intention of stopping making content. So I don't rule out coming back to them after some time has passed, and I would be glad if some of you would accompany on my journey down the line. I'm currently planning on streaming my first one-shot playthrough and trying out the card-building Souls-like pixel art game on my Twitch and YouTube. So if you are down for that, please subscribe / follow me / whatever you do. So see you, for those who come after and stuff.